I was in debt, and family refused to help me and wished me luck. I lived through, and years later when I became a businessman, they came to ask for help for Pai's wedding. 2 years ago, I hit rock bottom. My first business venture, the one into which I had poured my heart, soul, and every dollar I could scrape together, failed spectacularly. It wasn't just a failure, it was a disaster. I was drowning in debt, forced to borrow from friends just to keep the lights on and the food in the fridge. It wasn't a situation I ever imagined for myself. I'd always been the guy everyone depended on, the one who made things happen, the so-called golden child. When I finally swallowed my pride and turned to my family for help, I was met with something I'll never forget. I sat in the living room with my parents and tried to explain how bad things were. It wasn't easy for me to admit that I needed them. I'd spent years being their problem solver, helping with everything from Ashley's endless college problems to my mom's tech questions to my dad's side projects. Now I needed them. But instead of the understanding and support I thought I'd earned, I got this. "You're on your own, Tom. And to be honest, we don't have time for this right now," my mother said. "You know we're paying for Ashley's education right now, so, bye." That bye hit me like a brick wall. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they said it, like I was an afterthought. Ashley was their priority, as always. She was in grad school at the time, racking up expenses I didn't even want to think about. But I had helped them every time they needed it. For years. And now that I was the one in need, they couldn't even pretend to care. I left their house that day feeling a mixture of anger and humiliation that I didn't know how to process. I decided then and there that I was done being their golden fairy. Done being the guy who sacrificed for everyone else while they took me for granted. It wasn't easy, but I cut off contact with them almost completely. I only showed up for my birthday because my mom insisted, and even that felt forced. The rest of the time, I focused on climbing out of the hole I was in. I took small gigs, worked absurd hours, and slowly rebuilt my business from the ground up. Every dollar I made went toward paying off my debt. It took grit, sleepless nights, and sheer determination, but by some miracle, I made it work. Fast forward 2 years and I was in a completely different place. My business was pulling in $11,000 a month in net profits, and for the first time in years, I felt stable. More than stable, I felt like I'd won. I had pulled myself out of the mess on my own, just like they said I had to. But I never forgot what they'd said to me that day, or how little they cared. So when my parents and Ashley showed up at my door unannounced, I was already skeptical. They hadn't been to my house in years, and here they were, all three of them? I had no idea what they wanted, but I had a sinking feeling that it wasn't going to be good. I wasn't wrong. When I opened the door, my mom, dad, and Ashley were standing there, dressed like they were going to a business meeting. I leaned against the door frame, not bothering to hide my surprise. Usually only my parents showed up when they wanted something, but Ashley? This was new. "Hey, Tom," my mom chirped, her smile overly bright. My dad gave me a nod, while Ashley just stood there awkwardly, clutching her designer purse like it was a lifeline. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping aside to let them in. They walked into my living room, looking around as if they hadn't just ignored my existence for the past 2 years. My mom sat on the couch, smoothing her skirt, while my dad stood with his hands in his pockets. Ashley hovered near the window, avoiding my gaze. I stayed by the door, waiting for them to get to the point. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We're here to talk about something important," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Important, huh? Let me guess. You need something." My mom's smile faltered for a second, but it quickly recovered. "Well, it's Ashley. She's getting married." That caught me off guard. "Married? Since when?" Ashley finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Fred and I have been talking about it for a while. He's the one." I didn't know much about Fred, except that he was some guy she'd met at school. He wasn't exactly the type to make a strong impression, quiet, unassuming, and if I was honest, a little bland. "Okay," I said slowly. Congratulations, I guess. What does that have to do with me? That's when my mom dropped the bombshell. We were hoping you could help pay for the wedding. You know, contribute a little. I couldn't help myself, I laughed. Out loud. You're kidding, right? My dad frowned. Tom, this is serious. Weddings aren't cheap, and we've already spent so much on Ashley's education and her car. We just don't have the money right now. And you think I do? I shot back. After everything? You know what, I'll bite. How much are we talking? Ashley finally turned to me, her eyes wide and pleading. About 30 grand, she said. I stared at her, trying to process what I just heard. 30 grand? Are you out of your mind? It's not just for the wedding, she added quickly. It's for the honeymoon too. Fred and I want to go to Europe. I couldn't believe the audacity. 2 years ago, they'd left me to fend for myself when I was drowning in debt, and now they were asking me to finance Ashley's dream wedding and vacation? You've got to be kidding me, I said, shaking my head. I'm not your personal ATM. Ashley's face crumpled. Please, Tom. I love him so much. She hesitated, then blurted out. I'm pregnant. That made me freeze. Wait, what? I'm pregnant, she repeated, tears streaming down her face. I just want to give our baby a good start, you know. Fred and I need that. This turned into something I hadn't expected. My parents looked at me expectantly, as if waiting for me to cave. But all I could feel was anger at their entitlement, anger at Ashley for her reckless decisions, and anger at myself for ever thinking they'd change. I'll think about it, I said flatly, needing to get them out of my house before I exploded. Ashley fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, Tom. I need you. I held up a hand. Enough. I'm busy right now. We'll talk later. They left shortly thereafter, but the encounter left me confused. I couldn't wrap my head around the sheer audacity of their request, or the mess Ashley had gotten herself into. After they left, I sat on the couch and tried to process everything. That's when I made up my mind I had to talk to Fred. Something about it all felt wrong, and I wanted to hear his side of the story. The next day I called Fred and asked if we could meet. He sounded hesitant, but agreed after I assured him it wouldn't take long. We decided to meet at a local coffee shop near his apartment. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I had a feeling there was more to this situation than Ashley was letting on. Fred showed up on time, looking as inconspicuous as ever in a simple hoodie and jeans. He seemed surprised that I wanted to talk to him, but he shook my hand and sat across from me without much fuss. So, I began, getting right to the point. Ashley and my parents came to see me yesterday. They told me that you two are getting married. Fred's face immediately went pale. He looked down at his coffee cup and fidgeted nervously. Yeah, about that. I leaned back and waited for him to continue. She kind of dropped it on me, he admitted. She proposed last week. Now it was my turn to look surprised. She proposed to you? He nodded. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I care about her, but marriage? I'm not ready for that. I told her that, but she said it didn't matter because, well... He hesitated, then blurted it out. She's pregnant. I crossed my arms. And you're sure about that? About the pregnancy, I mean. Fred looked at me as if I'd just asked if the water was wet. She showed me the test. I didn't really have a choice but to believe her. Right, I said, thinking back to Ashley's dramatic plea. And how do you feel about all this? The wedding, the baby, the whole situation? Fred let out a long sigh. Honestly, I feel trapped. I love Ashley, but this wasn't my plan. She's the one who pushed for the wedding. She even talked to her parents about it before I had a chance to think about it. And now they're acting like it's a done deal. The pieces began to fall into place. Ashley had always been impulsive, but this was a whole new level. I couldn't help feeling sorry for Fred. He seemed like a decent guy who got caught up in Ashley's whirlwind. Look, I said, leaning forward. They came to me yesterday and asked for 30 grand to pay for the wedding and honeymoon. 30 grand, Fred. And now you're telling me you're not even sure you want to get married? Fred's eyes widened. They asked you for money? That's crazy. I don't even want a big wedding. I told Ashley I'd be fine with something small, but she insisted it had to be this huge thing. Typical, I muttered. Here's the deal, Fred. I'm not giving them a dime. If you're not on board with this wedding, you need to tell them. Don't let them guilt you into something you're not ready for. Fred looked conflicted, but nodded slowly. You're right. I have to be honest with her. Good, I said, standing up. Because if you don't, I will. We shook hands, and I left the cafe feeling strangely satisfied. For the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand with my family. Fred had confirmed what I already suspected. This whole thing was a mess of Ashley's making. Now it was time to confront my family. A few days later, I drove over to my parents' house. They weren't expecting me, but I didn't care. I was done letting them dictate the story. It was time to set the record straight. When I walked into the house, my mother greeted me with her usual over-the-top enthusiasm. "Tom! What a surprise!" she said, leading me into the living room where my father was watching television. Ashley was there, too, sitting on the couch, cell phone in hand. The atmosphere was almost too perfect, like they were plotting their next move. "I wanted to talk," I said, cutting to the chase. "About the wedding?" my mother asked, her eyes brightening. "Oh, Tom, I knew you'd come. Ashley's been so stressed, poor thing." I ignored her and turned to Ashley. "Where's Fred?" Ashley blinked, surprised by the question. "He's at work." "Why?" "Because I was talking to him," I said. "And you're not going to like what he had to say." The room fell silent. My dad muted the TV, and my mom's smile froze on her face. Ashley sat up straighter, clutching a throw pillow as if it would shield her from whatever was coming. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I mean," I said, "Fred doesn't want to get married. In fact, he doesn't even want a big wedding. He told me that you're the one pushing for it, and he feels trapped. And let's not forget the little detail about how you got pregnant on purpose." Ashley's face turned crimson. "That's not true," she snapped. "He's lying." I shrugged. "Funny, because he seemed pretty sure. He even said he told you he wasn't ready for marriage, but you ignored him and went straight to Mom and Dad. Sound familiar?" My parents looked at Ashley, their expressions changing from confusion to concern. My mother was the first to speak. "Ashley, is this true? Did you pressure Fred?" Ashley's eyes filled with tears. I love him so much. I thought if we got married, everything would be okay. And the baby dash." She stopped herself, realizing she was only digging the hole deeper. My father rubbed his temples. "Ashley, you can't just force someone to get married. It doesn't work that way." "Exactly," I said, crossing my arms. "And that's why I'm not giving you a dime for this ridiculous wedding. You want to play games? Fine. But don't drag me into it." Ashley started to cry, now full-blown sobs. "You don't understand. I need this. I need him." My mom rushed to comfort her while my dad just sat there shaking his head. I didn't feel sorry for Ashley. Not this time. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Before I could leave, Ashley's phone buzzed on the couch. She picked it up and her face went pale. "It's Fred," she whispered. "Go ahead," I said. "Answer it." She hesitated, then swiped to answer the call. We all watched as she listened in silence, her expression crumbling by the second. When she hung up, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What did he say?" my mother asked, her voice shaking. Ashley's voice was barely audible. He said it's over. He's breaking up with me. He doesn't want any of this." My dad cursed under his breath while my mom tried to comfort Ashley. But I just stood there, feeling a strange sense of vindication. I hadn't told Fred to break up with her, but I wasn't about to step in and fix things either. As I turned to leave, my dad called out, "Tom, wait. What about the baby?" I looked back at her. That's her responsibility now. She made her choices. I'm not bailing her out this time. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving them to deal with the aftermath. A week went by and I didn't hear from anyone in my family. Not a single phone call or text. I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the message that I was no longer their safety net. But deep down, I knew better. Sure enough, my mom showed up at my office one afternoon, looking more frazzled than I'd ever seen her. She wasn't the type to drop by unannounced, so I knew it was serious. "Tom, I need to talk to you," she said, wringing her hands. I sighed and motioned for her to sit down. "What is it now?" "It's Ashley," she said, her voice heavy with worry. "She's not doing well. After Fred broke up with her, she's a mess. She's not eating, she's barely sleeping, and she won't stop crying. She needs help." I stared at her without saying anything. What did she expect me to do? Wave a magic wand and fix everything? "And the baby," she added, her voice breaking. "We're worried about her health. It's early in the pregnancy, but the stress isn't good for her or the baby." I leaned back in my chair, trying to decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her that it wasn't my problem. After all they'd put me through, they didn't deserve my help. But another part of me couldn't ignore the fact that an innocent child was involved. "What exactly do you want?" I finally said. "She needs financial assistance," my mother admitted. "She can't afford to raise a baby on her own, and we're stretched too thin. We do what we can, but it's not enough." I almost laughed at the irony. 2 years ago, they told me to deal with my problems on my own. Now here they were, asking me to do the same for Ashley. "I'll think about it," I said, giving her the same line I'd given them before. "But don't expect me to swoop in and save the day." My mother looked like she wanted to argue, but she held her tongue. "Thank you," she said quietly, and then she left. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the situation. As much as I resented my family, I couldn't bring myself to ignore the fact that my nephew or niece would be born into this mess. It wasn't the baby's fault that Ashley had made terrible choices. So I called my mom and told her I'd help on one condition: Ashley had to be honest with herself and take responsibility for her choices. No more manipulation, no more excuses. If I was going to support her financially, I needed to see some effort on her part. My mother agreed, and a few days later I sat down with Ashley. She looked like a shell of her former self, tired, pale, and completely defeated. "I will help you," I told her. "But only for the sake of the baby. And that's not a blank check. You have to get yourself together. Get a job, take parenting classes, whatever it takes. I'm not going to do it all for you." Ashley nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. Thank you, Tom. I won't let you down." I wasn't sure if I believed her, but at least it was a start. A year later, things had settled down in ways I could never have imagined. Ashley had taken charge of her life. She found a part-time job at a daycare center and started taking parenting classes, showing a commitment I honestly hadn't expected. Her son, Lucas, was born healthy and quickly became the light of the family. I helped out financially when needed, but Ashley also worked hard to provide for him. It wasn't all on me anymore, which was a relief. The biggest surprise came when Fred came forward. He told Ashley that he wanted to be a part of Lucas' life. She was skeptical at first, but Fred followed through. He showed up consistently, helped with the baby, and even co-parented with Ashley. They didn't get back together, but their focus was on Lucas, and that earned my respect. One day we had a little family barbecue at my house. My parents doted on Lucas while Fred and Ashley worked together to entertain him. Watching them, I realized how far things had come. For the first time, it felt like everyone was pulling their weight instead of leaning on me for everything. Ashley came over and quietly thanked me for helping her through it all. I told her she'd done the hard part, she'd grown up and made it work. Lucas brought us together in a way I never expected. The family wasn't perfect, but it was better. And that was enough for me.